Hello, I'm Lee Moggan, and I'm delighted to be hosting the Irish Life Power of Support panel. With us here this morning, we have two Olympians who know all about the value of support. We have sports psychologist Jessie Barr, and we have the reigning national 10K, 10-mile and marathon champion, Mick Clohisey. You're both very welcome.
Thanks for having us.
Very much.
Thank you. Right from the day you started in your clubs, going through national competition, into international competition, and then the pinnacle at the Olympics, you must have experienced the value of the support along the way. Could you describe the power and the value of that? And I'll start with you, Jessie.
Yeah, look, I suppose when I first started in athletics, the first source of support was my parents. I wouldn't have actually gotten to where I was without them.
Yeah.
And it wasn't the support in that sense, wasn't the standing on the sideline shouting my name. It was dropping me to training, sitting at training, reading a paper, waiting for me to finish, you know, cooking our dinner, making sure we had our gear. And that went the whole way through. Driving the car until I was old enough to drive myself. But the power of that support is so valuable, and that didn't stop when I was old enough to do that stuff for myself. Even as a senior athlete going to competitions, I had the support. They used to travel with me to competitions, and again, it wasn't necessarily them standing on the sideline shouting. It was knowing they were there to offer words of wisdom and encouragement before the race, or a big hug if it hadn't gone so well. And that's where that power was really valuable, was knowing there was people in my corner, knowing there was people there. And that's why I love now in my own job, I can be that person in someone's corner. And it's lovely to be part of, you know, the Irish Life Power Support team now, because I can offer that to a wider group beyond who I usually work with.
I think that's important. Even knowing they're there when they're not is very important.
Yeah, for sure.
Mick, you've experienced the lonely miles out there for a long time by yourself, but subliminally and at the background, you know that there's support there. Some examples from yourself about how that gave you a little bit of pep.
Yeah, absolutely. All the way through my career, I've been very lucky to have members of my family and the wider club, Raheny Shamrocks, you know, that have supported me along the way. And you know, up until a couple of days ago, I can use an example. I was training up to Phoenix Park, this time totally on my own, doing 20 miles. And it was great to see so many groups of runners out around the park. And you know, you get the nod from each other and say hello, and I think it encouraged us on both sides, even for myself, seeing them and they're smiling and saying, you know, we're working up the hills on the S-bends that a lot of people use for training, and you know, just seeing each other helps, and that's an element of the power of support. And as I said, I've been very lucky with on my closer, like my family and stuff, and my father has been probably the #1 supporter of me, along with my coach Dick Cooper through the years. But an example of my dad, when I'm doing them long runs, he'd be on his bike in the Phoenix Park with the water bottles for me, looping around, going from one end of the park to the other, no matter what the weather. You know, a wet, windy day up the Phoenix Park,
and that's at the finish.
That's all part of it. And I've been lucky, and I think it's great to see so many people aiming for the marathon now, that they're in groups, and they might have family members too who appreciate the work that they're putting in, and as Jessie's saying, you know, preparing the dinners and things like that.
Yeah,
so
I think it's one of the reasons they go to the bother of coming to a race start, like the Irish Life Dublin race series at the moment. So many of them make the effort to get to Chesterfield Avenue rather than going out their own front door or whatever. The power too of having your name on your singlet. I've seen people being just rejuvenated when their name is called out. And again, that's that acknowledgement that I'm here for you.
It's a great feeling to hear your name shouted, especially in, you know, the latter stages of a marathon. I think it's a great thing to have on the singlet or on the vest, that people can shout a name, and it's amazing what it can do when you're feeling tired in the marathon, and that, you know, it can just turn your whole mentality around, you know, so it's all part of it.
I remember reading Ron Hill's autobiography, and after he broke the world 15-mile record, I think it was the acknowledgement of people just applauding him when he was back out the week after that really resonated as much.
The aftermath. And I've been lucky to experience some of that, especially after my 2 times running Dublin, 2018, 2019, and you know, I quite good runs for myself, and you know, probably my most memorable runs. And the weeks after the race, the days after, around my Clontarf where I live and stuff, you know, just people seeing what I'd done, and people who mightn't follow athletics too much, but they'd heard about it, and it's a great feeling to be.
Yes,
what you feel,
a buzz, a deadly buzz.
It is a
great
feeling.
That kind of thing, Jessie, if I lean over to your sports psychologist side, it could be seen as a distraction, this external support.
Yeah.
What tips would you give to people preparing now for the Irish Life Dublin Marathon to internalise and, well, to get rid of the distractions maybe?
Yeah, and that's a really good point, because support, you know, it's always well-meaning, and it can sometimes be distracting of something that you're not used to. So if you're used to always going out and running on your own or with you and your small squad, and suddenly you turn up at one of the, you know, the Irish Life race series, for example, maybe it was your first time in competing at something, and suddenly there's lines of people shouting for you, and it can feel a bit overwhelming. And I suppose it's harnessing that and expecting it, you know, so maybe...
Any tips to harness that?
Yeah, I think...
Loads of distractions.
Loads of distractions. I think always having a plan, you know, having a plan so you can focus on the process, because you can get very distracted by those externals, uncontrollables, the outcome, what the time's going to be, who's watching me, who's here, who am I running against.
So a plan before the race, a plan for during.
Yeah, so having a plan with your coach, what's my race plan going to look like? So there's always something to bring you back to what's in your control in that moment. There's always going to be a distraction. There'll always be something. If it's not the support, it's going to be the other runners. So having a plan, and then actually relishing the support, you know, actually enjoying it and saying, well, these people are here to wish me well. They're not here to judge. You know, the people who are there to support are there for a good reason. So I suppose what I sometimes do with athletes is get them to write down a list of what's in my control on the lead up to and on race day, and what's not in my control. Make a plan and maximize what's in my control. So my nutrition, my training, my race plan, and what's not in my control, can I adapt to it? So can I maybe do some of my runs in more busy areas, so I'm used to being around distractions, or accept that this is just the way it is. I'm going to have to, I'm running against 5,000 other people. This is just the way it's going to be. And having plans for that.
Down, sorry there, I hear from the writing, kind of a timetable of the day.
Yeah.
Time you get up, time you leave, time you arrive. So there's distractions around you. You know you're
sent
there.
to yourself. Yeah, you know what to expect. And look, it's always, I think, you know, there's not going to be many opportunities that you have, because I've never ran a Dublin Marathon. I won't be involved. I'm not a marathon runner, so I won't be involved in October at the Irish Life Dublin Marathon this year, but I will be there to support. And I have heard the atmosphere is meant to be incredible at them. So to actually be part of that and to be one of the people who's creating and generating that atmosphere, I think it's something to really embrace.
I've seen many cases where the athletes themselves generate the enthusiasm in the crowd just by lifting their hands.
And it's two ways, you know. So I think instead of fearing that, you know, fearing that kind of external distraction, see it as something, like Mick said, that's going to lift you at the end, that those last couple of kilometres are going to really hurt, and there's going to be times where that support is exactly what you need in that moment.
So the plan before, during, and maybe abandon the after bit.
And just embrace and enjoy it.
Mick, I was admonished at the start of one of the races. I called you the hippie from the north side, and a woman came in giving out hell to me that I was distracting you or whatever.
I wouldn't say that. That was a nice bit of encouragement.
I hope it was. If I get into something more specific to the marathon, Mick, someone like you would run 20 miles regularly, you know, traditionally at weekends, and it's relatively no bother. 26 and a bit is. Can you explain why that is that bit more difficult, and how you prepare without doing 26 for 26?
Yeah, obviously when you know, 20 miles is kind of the staple of a lot of long distance runners, marathon runners kind of training when they're building up to a marathon. And I think when you go over that distance, you know, you're kind of going into your reserves a bit too much in a training block. So for example, for myself, it's preparing for the Dublin Marathon now. I might run 22 miles a few times, maybe 24 miles, but I think for the majority of people, the 20 miles, maybe 22. I know a lot of people are operating in K, so maybe 30 plus K, 35K. But it's them extra miles that, you know, on the day of the marathon, the adrenaline, the fact that you've rested and you've prepared, you'll get through them. So I wouldn't want people to be worrying that they've only covered 20 miles. Because
so there's a bit of trusting in your training. You're not doing 26.
There is, because you're saving that for the day itself. Because I think if you're trying to cover that distance in training, that's going to, as I say, empty the tank a bit too much. So if you get to 20 miles, that should be sufficient. And them extra miles, you know, as I'm saying, with the power of support, with the adrenaline of the crowds around you, you'll get through it. You know, it will be tough, but them 6 miles after 20 in the marathon is when people say it really starts to kick in. But as I was saying, with the support, with the adrenaline and the belief of all the training and the confidence you've had from the weeks and weeks of training behind you, you'll get through them.
It's the place of most potential as well. If you trust yourself, it's the place where
exactly, yeah, and it's you know, it is the point where you have to mentally kind of, you know, stay as positive as you can. And look, you will have them moments of doubt. You know, as I've experienced myself, I could be running on a certain road and take a turn, and then all of a sudden I'm feeling really bad. But then I turn another corner and I'm feeling great again. So it's a roller coaster, the marathon, especially in them latter stages. But I think when we're all in it together, and everyone is in it together, the crowds, the people competing, you know, it brings everyone along and it gets them through.
So trust the training, trust the coach who's provided the help for the training. Now you said it's a mental thing. So if I again ask you, Jessie, as a 400 hurdler, there were times you could do 10 flights of hurdles and get evidence you were ready.
Yeah.
It's not possible for the runners to get evidence that they can complete the 26.2.
Yeah.
What tips would you give them to base that trust in their coach and trust in themselves?
Yeah, I suppose, like what Mick said, you never want to do that 26.2 because you don't want to empty the tank. So it is trusting in the build-up of mileage. And what I would always encourage athletes is to have some sort of record of their training. It's not too late to start it now. There's still plenty of time to start doing that. Actually taking note of the work that you're doing, how you felt on that run, because then you have an actual record that you can go back on if you're feeling doubts and thinking, oh, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this, and say, well, look at all the mileage I've built up. I may not have done it all in one go, but I know this is something I'm physically capable of. Look, marathon running.
Personal affirmations in your own
Personal
diary.
affirmations. Evidence is exactly the word you use, and I think that's really important. It's, you know, confidence comes from the work that we've done. And okay, you may not have done that exact distance in training, so you don't have that exact evidence, and sometimes that place of uncertainty can be really scary. And that's where you do have to trust in your support team, that they're all telling you you're ready, physically you've hit all the markers that you need to hit. It will be tough, but you're ready for that. You're ready. You've done the hard miles. You can do it. And sometimes having done it in training isn't always a good thing, because then you have a direct marker and you're thinking, well, if this, maybe it can be a confidence knock if in training, because obviously you don't have the adrenaline, you don't have the atmosphere of a race. So if you do a 26.2 mile training run and you don't have a good time, you don't run a good time because you don't have all those extra kind of performance enhancers that naturally come on competition day, then you might go into race day actually less confident. Whereas if you go in, that little bit of uncertainty, it can be a place that's scary. That extra couple of kilometres that you haven't ran can be a scary place, or it can be a place where there's a big opportunity. What can I get out of myself? And sometimes it's reframing it that way.
Yeah, and I like that reframing. I mean, Mick, you have to run the miles to physically be ready. But what you're really saying, Jessie, that there has to be evidence of work done, and you're talking about writing the plan.
Absolutely, yeah.
I like the idea you can't go and claim you're winning lotto if the numbers are in your head.
Exactly.
You need the numbers in the ticket.
That's
so
it.
I'm hearing that from you.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
And you're probably hearing, I love having stuff written down. There is power in, you know, committing the pen to paper and just getting it out of your head and having that there. Yeah, it's really positive. Yeah, for sure.
The running diary, I think, is, you know, that's the old, I remember like Dick Cooper, my coach, would show me back through his diaries from, you know, when he was competing, and you know, even my father, I remember when I was young, he'd have his diaries and I'd be flicking through them, and you know, there is something great about, and I've used them in, as Jessie was saying, I totally agree, like coming up close to the marathon, I might look back at this block and say, okay, I did that session, jeez, I forgot how good that was, did that long run, and then you start to build, and you're like,
do you put anything in your diary, Mick, other than the mechanics of the distance and the time? Do you record how you're feeling or whatever?
I wouldn't be too detailed. I know some, I've trained with athletes who are, and I'd probably be quite brief, but it's just even seeing what I've done. And I might mention what the weather was or something, but you know, everyone has their own way of doing it. You know, you can keep it just right the distance, right the paces, or you know, just, you know, go more in depth on how you're feeling.
There's power in that. Everyone has their own way. There's the power of the support, and there's the power. I'll stick with you, Mick, for a minute. What do you like on the week leading into a marathon? What do you like to live with on that week alone?
Yeah, I suppose the week leading into a marathon, for a lot of people, they can find difficult because they've been training so hard, and now it's trying to conserve energy and rest, and you're so used to training that it can make you feel uneasy, uncomfortable, you can feel sluggish, your appetite might go a bit. So for myself, I suppose over the years of, you know, learning about the marathon, you know, it is a learning process, and I've kind of gotten to know what works well for me. So I think I'm quite relaxed the week of a marathon. I think I've said before, like, because I compete from the marathon down to 5 miles, 10K, I'd be more worked up before a 10K, or say a classic one is the Raheny 5 mile, because of this pressure to go hard from the start, which for me I don't like. I like the marathon where I can build in. So for a marathon I'm actually quite relaxed, especially when I know I've done the training, and that's where the preparatory work comes in massively, that you know you've done it, so you can say, I'm actually going to try and enjoy this week, being lazy as you can, to what extent you can.
So you can do a bit of housework or whatever, you can catch up on that.
Yeah, there's plenty of things to do now for me, but I'd be quite relaxed, you know, and it's just trying to, I suppose it is trying to be as relaxed as you can and not worrying about trying to, should I go out and do another run? The less you do the week of the marathon, it's better for everyone. And then trying to eat well, trying to get your sleep. And then there's another side of that is I've never slept well the night of a marathon. Yeah. I don't think I've ever had a proper night's sleep, because you generally have to get up quite early, have your breakfast. I wouldn't worry about it. Like it's, I suppose it's them few nights during the week that if you can get a few solid nights sleep.
I heard a tip one time, Mick, it's the night before that's the most important. And I think that can, people wouldn't be travelling on those ones.
Yeah, exactly. So I wouldn't, people try and stay as relaxed as you can, and you know, and do what you're used to. That's why these weeks of training now, where you're doing your long runs, this is the time to try and replicate what's going to be like on race day, with your meals the night before, or whatever way it is. Just have things as prepared as you can for when the week comes.
And a doer, That's replicating race day. Any tips, Jessie, for that week? You're not running as much. You can be lazier. You're feeling different with eating. Yeah. What are the tips you'd say where there's that urge to get out there and do it, but you got to keep the brakes on?
Yeah,
that week.
I heard an interesting phrase for that. I think it was called taper tantrum, which I hadn't heard of before. That idea that like when you're tapering, you can go into panic mode. Yeah. And it's really, really common, especially if you're quite new to running and quite new to kind of marathon running. Like obviously Mick has said, over the years he's kind of perfected his week of kind of routine. But if this is your first time, you might feel that panic of, I'm not doing enough. I should be doing more. It's that should. Oh, I should be filling my time.
That's the power of the diary too.
Power of the diary. And, you know, having a plan in place is really important. So if you know, I usually run in the morning from this time to this time, to have something else in place. You know, maybe go and meet someone for a coffee who you haven't got to see, or maybe meet your training partners, you know, because they're probably feeling the same. You know, maybe fill that time with something else productive. Again, so you're not tempted.
Power of support,
Exactly. Gather your support team. Use that time for something else. You know, maybe instead of going for the run, that's where you do some mobility. That's where you do some stretching. Maybe some, you know, some yoga. Do something else if you feel I'm not doing enough, I'm being lazy. Yeah. Fill it with something that's not going to take away from your performance. So it's not doing
nothing, it's actually doing something, but making sure it's
it's filling your time differently.
Demanding.
Yeah, and because it's a stressful time. Again, I mentioned about uncertainty. It's a really uncertain time. So, you know, having a plan for that week, knowing that it's going to be a little bit uncomfortable, knowing that I'm going to be a little bit panicked, maybe talking to people who've ran marathons, how did they feel? Recognizing and normalizing, I am a little bit panicked, but this is the normal way to feel, and that's okay. And I've written a couple of blogs for the Irish Life Dublin Marathon website, and one of the more recent ones was that on how do you prepare for race day, and it's doing what you always do. That's not the week to start eating new foods. It's not the week to start trying to sleep for 12 hours when you only usually get 8 hours. Keeping your routine as similar as possible is really, really important, rather than be tempted to add new things in when there isn't as much going on. It's trying to just trust the process to now and try to relax and sit in that discomfort.
Begin to earn the work you've put in, both physically and mentally at that point.
Exactly,
even to distract yourself by doing something totally different. You know, it could be whatever, like doing jobs of other sorts, you know, because it's...
And yet it's not every job. It's not the day to go gardening. It's not the day to...
Definitely the day or two before the marathon.
Read that book you've always wanted to read.
Yeah, exactly. But just do something totally different. Just distract yourself, because you can overthink it then that week. I mean, there's only so much you need to prepare. You can overthink running as well on a marathon. And a lot of it just happens on the day, you know, because it's all built in there. So just do something different, and as well, the day before, try and stay off your feet, because you don't want to be doing something crazy on the Saturday before the marathon. But that week, you know, just distract your mind and
slow down.
Yes.
And even just, you know, you mentioned that support team. That could be a really good time to nearly have a plan in advance with your support team, whoever that is. So, you know, maybe some people could be working with a sports psychologist, or could be working with a physio, checking in with your support team. What should I be doing in that week?
Then,
use the people around you as well. This is a time that, like, you know, or maybe you know, partners at home, I'm going to be a bit stressed out. I'm not, if I take it out on you, I'm sorry. You know, really kind of preempting that this is the way I might feel. This is the way I've heard the week before can feel.
Jessie Barr called it a taper tantrum.
Taper tantrum is what I heard.
It's a symptom.
Yeah, it's a thing. Apparently, it's a thing. So, you know, harnessing that support in that week can be really valuable as well.
Final question to both of you. Mick, you mentioned enjoyment there. I should have emphasised that a bit more earlier. And I suppose we're talking in the ideal situation now. Everything is going to work out well. What's your get out of jail tip when things begin, the wheels begin to come off? What's your get out of jail tip?
Question.
It's a good question, yeah. And look, we have to accept in a marathon, as I said, it's a roller coaster. There will be ups and downs, and even sometimes early on, you might be feeling rough. It's just, and it can take you a while to actually get into your rhythm. And so I suppose it's being as patient as you can as well, and not panicking either early on if things aren't going great, because it can change. Like if you get a cramp or a stitch early on, you think this is disaster, but they do pass, and you have to just, it's patience is the key in the marathon. But a lot of times, I suppose I've used it in training a lot doing hard sessions, is if it's a negative thoughts that do creep in, they will creep in, it's just natural, is to try and flip them totally on their head and say, I'm enjoying this pain. You know, this is enjoyment. This isn't really pain.
Yeah, you've mentioned that. So I suppose the enjoyment of the occasion. It is called, the Irish Life Dublin Marathon is called the Friendly Marathon, and I think there's wonderful support around the place. All right.
But if you're feeling that bit rough, you know, just try and it's just like total reverse, saying this isn't really pain. This is going to be over.
All right.
You know, so it's hard to do at the time, I know, but it's just trying to do all these little cues. And I always say for Dublin as well, once you hit, talking along the route, like when you hit that last climb up Roebuck, it's nice then, pretty much. There's one little climb at the UCD flyover, that's short and sweet. You're down Foster's Avenue, then the flyover, Nutley Lane, Ballsbridge. It's one of the nicest finishes.
That's a very clear visualisation of the finish. So you're miles from it, but now, and I suppose that brings in.
But that's nice to think about that. You know, that you get over these parts, and you know the second half of the marathon is considered faster in Dublin as well, and you know you get the drags of the first half out of the way. You know, so it is nice to think them lines that there is nice patches coming.
There's a great tip there, Mick, in the sense you named the streets for the finish. I wonder how many of the runners will be able to do that. And I suppose, again, it's stepping into that preparation of maybe visualising it. You can get a video of the race.
There is a video on
the
YouTube channel.
So you can get to do that. So that'd be a good.
And as I said before, I think with Dublin, what I like about it compared to some of the big city marathons in Europe, which are just, you know, you go to run your fast times and they're dead flat. And we don't know the streets, but with Dublin, especially for people who are from Dublin or live and know the city, you can break it up. You know, you're coming out of town, you're in the Phoenix Park, you say, oh, this is where I train all the time. Then you're Castleknock, back into the park, Chapel Lizard, Inchicore, Rathgar, all these places. And it's like, break them up into little segments. You say, oh, I'm here now. And there's a pocket of crowd here, it goes quiet, you get a little breather, you go into another crowd. So it's, and I think that's why my PB is from Dublin, and it's that encouragement, the crowds, and being just something nice about being running on them streets.
A great demonstration of visualisation there.
Absolutely, yeah.
Your get out of jail tip, wheels are coming off, you're feeling bad. What's your little tip to people?
Well, the self-talk piece that Mick had said was going to be one of my get out of jails, is that reframing those thoughts, because the wheels are coming off, and when they come off, your head is going to go to a negative place. So it is reframing what you're thinking, maybe having some, like you mentioned, positive affirmations for in that moment. And I think remembering why you're doing it. You know, in that moment, you might be questioning, why am I doing this? Having, again, written down in your training diary or somewhere that you can read before you go, why did I sign up to this? Why am I doing this? Why do I want to finish it? Because it's going to hurt, and there's going to be times you're going to question it, and you're going to have times where you're going to really want, you're going to have to dig deeper than you probably ever have. You know, why am I doing this? Why am I ready for this? You know, so there's going to have been days you probably felt those wheels come off in a training session as well. How did you manage it in that sense? And just remembering why you're doing it. Some people could be running for a charity, some could be running to try and set a new personal best. Maybe it's just a huge achievement to finish their first ever marathon. What's the reason I'm doing this? What will I get out of it when this hurt goes? What was the purpose?
And I suppose if we get full circle, the power of support is the people who support you will be there to support you or love you or affirm you, no matter how it goes. PB or no PB.
Absolutely.
I'm looking forward to the race all the more. Thank you, Jessie. Thanks you, Mick. Thanks for all your advice.
Thanks very
Thanks for your questions.
Thank you.